Moving on now to our next session, Trending, What's Hot and What's Not. To present data on current wine and spirit trends is the president of IWSR. Please welcome Brandy Rand.
Hi everyone, how are you? So I'm going to talk to you about numbers, very briefly, but more importantly than numbers, since we're all bombarded with numbers every single day, what's up, what's down, is really why is that happening? What is the story behind the numbers? So I'm going to set the scene first. You've been in the business at least for 10 years or more. You know that the world has changed drastically. We know that wine and spirits have been stealing share from beer. We know that there's a rise of quality and trading up. We know that there's new ways of buying and the demise of traditional retail, right? We're all on our phones all the time. It's how we experience brands. We know there's something called category convergence, what we like to call cross-category consumption, which means that people are drinking across categories with more frequency. We also know there's occasion-based consumption blurring, lots of changing demographics, multicultural, generation and gender, culture of truth and authenticity, and of course, this healthy lifestyle and label awareness. So I'm going to touch through all of these things and give you a little bit more context as to how that affects beverage alcohol. But first, let's look at what we're anticipating the full year of total beverage alcohol consumption to end up. So IWSR is the only specialist beverage alcohol company in the world. That's all we've been doing for 40 years. We track every brand, every category across 150 countries. So we have a very clear sense of what the trends are going to be and exactly how numbers are going to be shaking up. So in the US right now, we see things slowing down a bit, but still some growth for wine and spirits. But beer, cider, and the whole FAB or RTD category continues to decline. But if you look over time, we are a beer drinking culture. The US right now has always had a high proportionate amount of share in beer. But wine and spirits over time have been taking from that share. And if you look at spirits in particular, vodka and whiskey are the two categories that Americans consume the most. But this shift in share and these changes and what's going on is not just a beer problem. The beer guys do have a problem and they're looking to fix it, but the bigger issue is a dynamic shift in consumer behavior. What do I mean by that? We are a digital society. How we communicate with each other is very differently than how we used to. We choose experiences and we like to share them. What it comes down to is experience and convenience. These are the two tenets that I believe really resonates in terms of how you look at consumers choose brands. And it's not just beverage alcohol brands, it's all brands. And it's always millennials. We talk about millennials a lot, and I think it's really important to say it's not just about the millennials. This relates to all generations and genders. A lot of the things millennials are blamed for are really just big shifts in consumer behavior. It doesn't matter who you are, you spend a lot of time on your phone. You live by your phone. The other thing that's really important is this culture of personalization and authenticity, right? These days we celebrate difference, we all strive to be different, and it's important to note it's not just what's new, but what's true, right? Authenticity, which is also very associated with craft, they're not mutually exclusive. Big brands also have to have authenticity, right? It has to matter. So one of the trends we've seen that's really interesting is individual portion size. And it used to be that beer owned individual portion size, right? You had to share a bottle of wine, share a bottle of spirits, and those things were a group. There were consumption behaviors that are tied with groups of people. And we've seen a big shift about individual portion size. I want what I want when I want it. I want 100-calorie packs of this. I want small portions. And we start looking at things in smaller sizes. And with that, we've seen a rise in small sizes for wine and spirits. We've seen a lot of innovation and growth in this area, right, where consumers are looking to have what they want when they want it. These changing tastes in our society now actually are really important and very different. So we know that we are a very big Hispanic culture. In the state of California alone, there's more consumers that identify with being Hispanic than white. The two categories that Hispanics consume the most are tequila and Scotch whiskey, and also on the beer side, it's a lot of non-alcoholic and low-alcoholic beer. So what do we see? We see a shift right now in tequila. It's a very popular category, so much so that we anticipate that tequila is going to overtake rum by volume. We also know that as a culture, We like spicy, we like strong, we like savory. There's a big change in the types of foods that we eat, right? There's more authentic cuisine, and everything's been a bit different. There's been a shift. We see a rise in bitter aperitifs and these herbal, savory flavors. Mezcal, smoky rum, all this type of stuff has been very important. Next, the occasion blurring. It used to be if you went to a stadium, you'd have a beer, right? You went to a nice restaurant, you'd split a bottle of wine. Now, right, consumers have demanded and said, well, why can't I have wine or a cocktail at a stadium? And what's wrong with canned cocktails or batch cocktails or cocktails on tap? What's wrong with wine on tap? What's wrong with having a can of wine, right? All of those things did not exist several years ago. And the thing that's most important is the quality of products have increased substantially, not only across all categories, but especially when we start looking at some of these smaller size packages, kegged wines, kegged cocktails, all of these things, right? So suddenly, you don't have to have a certain type of beverage alcohol category based on a certain set of occasion. And this has thrown marketing people sideways, right? Because it used to be you could anticipate who your vodka consumer was, when they were going to consume it, how they were going to consume it. Most brands talk about occasions that consumers think in terms of, if I'm going to be here or with these types of people, I'm going to drink this type of product. That's very hard and difficult to predict. I'm sure most of us in this room have maybe started out an afternoon of day drinking with a beer, and then maybe we had wine at dinner, and then maybe we wound down at night with an old-fashioned. So in one night, in one day, people have, all of us, me included, will drink across multiple categories. It's a very big change and shift in behavior. And then this cross-category convergence, I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I said, well, this is kind of how consumers look at the world now, right? We see things like root beer flavored Oreos and the Dorito taco and ocean spray juice mocktails and Moscow Mule potato chips and coconut water and shampoo, and suddenly you think all of these things that might have seemed weird before, consumers start to expect it, right? There's these flavor mashups that we see all the time. And then you start to see how this becomes normalized in beverage alcohol. There are partnerships between coffee producers and craft producers and beer and wine and barrel aging across different categories, and suddenly that stuff doesn't seem so weird anymore. There's an expectation that flavor mashups are trendy and sort of the norm. So again, wine and cocktails on tap and cans, coffee, tea, and water and beer cocktails. Of course, the big trend with these canned cocktails that we've seen in terms of beer cocktails, tea infusions, sparkling water cocktails, and then also this label awareness. Well, what's in the bottle and what am I drinking? And I think the most important thing is this new way of buying. So this is a slide that when I present and when I talk to people, it's very eye-opening. And here's why it's eye-opening. That quadrant in the upper left-hand corner, that's how we've traditionally marketed beverage alcohol brands, on and off premise, right? You build a brand on premise, you program off premise, you do your shelf sets, your POS. All of these things are the playbook for how we launch a brand. It's very tradition-based. And then we have this thing we call e-premise, right? This new way where consumers are experiencing brands on this little square thing in their hands or on their computers, and sometimes their first experience with any kind of a brand is on a screen, right? And we know there's things like delivery and DTC, all of these things that are really driven by a savvy demand culture. Price competition, all of this is very convenience-based, right? Then we have what we call the product premise. Well, product premise are all these craft breweries, craft distilleries, and wineries. We have seen an extraordinary amount of growth over the past several years. Right now, there are over 6,000 breweries, over 2,000 distilleries alone in the US. In the state of California, for example, and I love this stat, there are over 900 breweries in the state of California, which means every single person in California lives within 5 minutes of a brewery, right? So what does that mean? How does that affect you? Well, it affects you because a lot of consumers start to think of, gee, instead of going to this local restaurant or bar down the street, why don't I go to this really great distillery? I can bring my dog. I can buy barbecue from a food truck. I can hang out all day. I can meet the guy who makes the product. I can get a t-shirt. Suddenly that afternoon of drinking has turned into an experience, right? That's very local based. It's very authenticity based. It's very experience based. And sales, we know, are very high in this area. Next, we have something called the new premise. These are things like outdoor concerts and pop-up bars and movie theater consumption. And a lot of this has to do with retailers trying to figure out ways they can drive consumers in and blurring those occasions. People say, well, why can't I have a cocktail when I'm at the movies? Right? I don't want to go to just a regular restaurant. I want a secret pop-up restaurant that's only invite only, and I have to wear a certain thing, and I have to do a secret code, right? This is all experience-based. So really what it's about is my premise. Consumers are demanding experience when it comes to beverage alcohol, and it's not just about on and off premise anymore. And that's how we are programmed in beverage alcohol to think about brands, and this is the new world. So this retail apocalypse, right? So there's been a lot of talk in the news about retailers are shutting down, stores are closing. Over the next 5 years, 1 in 4 malls are going to close. How did that happen, right? This is about convenience. And a lot of it is very focused on verticals. Warby Parker started selling eyeglasses online. Dollar Shave Club started saying, gosh, going to the store to get razors for a dude is not like a fun thing to do. Why don't I just mail the razors to the guy? And what about all these cooking kits, these meal kits saying, hey, we know it's really hard to figure out recipes, you're busy, you're starved for time. Let's just put your food in a box and deliver it to you and give you the recipe so you can have an authentic experience at home that's also very convenient for you. See how I kept coming back to experience and convenience? So this spillover and this model of direct-to-consumer across these niche product segments has really been a spillover into beverage alcohol. It's how consumers expect to experience things. And this thirst for experience, staying in is the new going out, right? We know that consumption across beer, wine, and spirits, more people are choosing to stay in. Why? Well, it's really easy. You can binge on Netflix, you can get product delivered to your door, you can get food delivered to your door, you can go to Whole Foods and actually buy a really great meal. All these grocerant models, right, where a lot of places will allow you to have really high quality takeout food. This allows you to spend more on that bottle of wine or those spirits and make cocktails at home and hang out. I think most of us have been in a situation where we've been debating whether we should go out and meet our friends or just stay at home because we think, hey, I can make a pretty good meal at home and have a great cocktail, and I have all this knowledge and these tools, and I'm just going to stay in instead. And that's where we see this trading up and this premiumization, right? People are willing to spend more money on products when they can have them at home because they understand the markups now. They know the prices, right? So we see growth across premium above spirits and wine. We see that continuing to grow. Of course, this has to do with the do-it-yourself culture, the rise of the home bar, right? The time is about partying at home. You can't open a Pottery Barn catalog now without seeing stuff about bar kits. And it's very easy to get silicone ice trays and Yari mixing glasses. And there's a lot of amazing cocktail books that are out right now to teach you how to make cocktails at home. So this culture over the past 10 years, maybe even 15 years, but certainly the last 10 years, has been about entertaining at home and the rise of the home bar. But here's the thing. If someone decides they're going to go out, they have to have it matter. It takes a lot, right? There's all these great things about staying at home. It's comfortable, it's easy, right? You can do all this stuff. But if you're going to go out, you want it to matter. That's where the experience comes in. Consumers want to say, well, I want to meet the maker and the grower. You have to entertain me. I have to have something special. What's going to be different? And of course, I want to be able to take a picture of it and post it on Instagram and say, hey, look what I got. Look what I was. This is interesting. And here's the scary thing. It's never been easier or cooler to not drink booze. This is like a big thing we talk to our clients about all the time. And everyone says, oh, it's a fad, it's not gonna last. But we know there are numbers of studies worldwide that show that people are drinking less because of health concerns. We know that younger generations are drinking a little bit less as well, and we know that people want to have an occasion or opportunities to drink lower alcohol products. We've seen a rise in lower alcohol products or zero-proof cocktails on bar menus, which I'm sure the panel will talk about next. And there's a big white space right now because nobody owns this segment. There are not any high-quality products. But over the last couple of days, there's been some brands that have decided to launch and go into this space. And this isn't new. I was having dinner with some suppliers recently, and we were all talking about over the past 15 years across all of our careers, how many failures we'd all seen related to low and no alcohol products. But we all kind of netted out with saying, well, maybe it just wasn't the right time, right? Now we live in a society where nut milks and kombucha and health and wellness are prevalent, right? It's just how we live. It's the things we pay attention to, being healthy and feeling good about ourselves. These low and no alcohol products are on the rise. We've seen things like Seedlip, of course, which is the first zero alcohol spirit. There's a brand called Sense, which is a wine that's sold right now through Kroger that's endorsed by Weight Watchers. Who's behind Weight Watchers? Oprah Winfrey, right? what do you think is going to happen with this growth in this brand with low alcohol wines? The volumes on these brands are growing substantially because there are no options. The consumers really want permission to still be able to drink because they enjoy drinking, right? It's part of an experience. You like to get home from work and have a cocktail or a glass of wine, and sometimes you want to say, well, I wish it just had a little fewer calories, but I still want the taste and the experience. So this is a really interesting segment that we expect to see a lot of growth on, and I don't think it's a fad. I think that the time is ripe right now globally, and we do see in very heavy beer markets like Australia and the UK and Germany that there's now a rise of a lot of these brewers making quality, high quality, low alcohol beers, for example. And this healthy lifestyle, this rise of the sober curious, I mean, there are all sorts of clubs out there, things that are telling people, hey, it's okay, you can still have a social life if you don't go to a bar, you can do all these things. And this menu over here, this zero proof menu, if you look at it very closely, I thought this was brilliant. So I found this menu, and what they've done is they've taken everyday non-alcoholic products and they've given them provenance. If you look there, it says, hey, you can have a Dr. Pepper from North Country, Texas. You can have a Sprite from Monterrey, Mexico. So what it's done is it's created an experience for people who don't drink alcohol to also have choice and a menu and have provenance for non-alcoholic products, right? So we're trying to actually create space for people what to drink when you're not drinking. It's a very big question, right? And we've seen a rise in zero-proof cocktails and also really good non-alcoholic options. So what does the future hold, right? These are a lot of really interesting trends I've kind of encapsulated that I think are important. And the big takeaway here is look outside of beverage alcohol. Look at your own lifestyle. Look at your friends. Look at your family. What kinds of decisions do you make about what you eat and what you drink, right? How much you spend for things. All of these are part of a larger cultural shifts that affect how people consume beverage alcohol. And there's a couple of really interesting things that are a big discussion right now, right? Are beer and cider going to fight back? Are they going to win? Can they get back the share? Well, I certainly know they're trying very hard. So what does that mean for wine and spirits? Of course, cannabis, right? This is a big topic of conversation. There's a lot of laws and a lot of complications, and it hasn't really been sorted out yet. But there's, I think, a big area here where we start getting into maybe CBD or THC-infused cocktails that don't have alcohol, or maybe it's a combination of both, depending on federal laws. There's a lot of complications and things that might affect that. And of course, e-commerce, right? How is that going to affect beverage alcohol? As more and more states start changing laws with direct shipping and more consumers are going to places, how will this affect what's happening? So lots of things to think about, but overall, we really have an opportunity here, and there's the most exciting time to be in beverage alcohol is right now. The premium products, the amount of people that are getting to this space that are bringing really amazing global, local brands and also creating their own brands. So a lot of very interesting things that are happening and a lot of really interesting changes that give opportunity. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the next panel, and I'm sure they're going to elaborate on a lot of these trends. Thanks.